"I am not moving," the little girl said. "Ma'am, your pass isn't in the system. Step aside now or I'll call security," the gate agent barked. The line went silent. Someone hissed, "Get a manager." How did an 8-year-old get blocked like this? How did her boarding pass vanish at the gate? Stay. Watch what happens. This ends differently. But first rewind. Now. Don't click away. Not yet, because what you're about to hear isn't just an airport mix-up. It's a public humiliation, served cold, in front of a line full of strangers. And it ends with a kind of justice you can feel in your chest. Think about it. You're standing there while the world keeps moving. Announcements echo overhead. Shoes shuffle forward. Someone sighs into their phone like your problem is background noise. And the moment a uniformed voice says, "Policy," people suddenly forget how to look you in the eye. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong? Not because you did something wrong, but because someone decided, quietly, casually, that you were the kind of person they could push aside? Have you ever watched it happen to someone else and hated yourself for staying silent? That's what makes this story so hard to swallow. Because the worst part isn't the denial, it's the way the line reacts. A few faces harden, a few eyes drop to the floor. Most people do what people do when discomfort gets loud. They pretend they didn't see. So listen closely, because there's a reason this moment went viral. Not because of a scream, not because of a fight, but because of restraint. Because in a place where adults are taught to talk down, a child refused to fold. If you've ever swallowed your pride at a counter, if you've ever apologized just to keep the peace, I want you to still stay for this. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, would you have spoken up? Or would you have stared at your shoes like everyone else? And yet, one voice cuts through it. Not a speech, not an argument. One sentence, spoken with a smile that doesn't ask permission. A sentence that lands like a warning. By the end of this, you'll understand why the person with the least power in that line suddenly had everyone's attention. You'll understand why security didn't sound so terrifying anymore. And you'll understand why a gate that was built to control the flow of people couldn't control what happened next. But to understand how that kind of calm shows up in a moment designed to break you, we have to go back before the line, back before the stairs, back to the minutes when everything still felt normal right before the ground shifted under their feet. The gate area looked the way every American airport gate looks when time is running out: bright lights, hard floors, and a line that pretends it isn't a line. A voice floated from the ceiling speakers, calm and automated, calling groups and zones like it was reading a bedtime story. People stood shoulder to shoulder anyway. Suitcases leaned against ankles. Coffee cups steamed. Screens glowed. Everyone faced forward, because forward meant control. At the front, the boarding podium sat like a little courtroom. A counter, a scanner, a keyboard, a monitor angled just enough that only the agent could see it. Behind that counter, the gate agent moved with the practiced speed of someone who had done this 1,000 times and didn't have room for one more question. Tap, beep, tear. Next. Tap, beep. Next. In the line, a mother and her daughter waited with that quiet airport patience that is really just discipline. The mother stood close, one hand on a backpack strap, the other holding a phone she wasn't even looking at. The little girl held a boarding pass between both hands, like it was a permission slip to a better world. She wasn't bouncing. She wasn't whining. She was watching. Because airports teach you fast. You're not a person here. You're a barcode. Around them, strangers performed the same small rituals. A businessman adjusted his earbuds. and acted like the gate didn't exist. A couple argued in whispers over who had the charger. Someone behind them dragged a carry-on that clicked with every step, the sound sharp enough to feel like judgment. A kid somewhere cried. Nobody turned. Everybody kept moving. That's how public spaces work when nobody wants to be involved. The mother checked the overhead screen once, then again. Not because she doubted her eyes, but because she understood the unspoken rule: if your name isn't where it should be, you start to disappear. Her daughter followed her gaze, then looked back down at the paper in her hands. She traced the printed lines with a fingertip as if touch could make it more real. The boarding call shifted. Another group, another wave. The line tightened. People stepped forward like they were being pulled by a rope. The air changed to less casual, more urgent. That's the moment the gate becomes a test. Not a place, a test. And here's the part most people don't talk about, because it makes them uncomfortable. Sometimes there are more ready-to-go passengers than seats that end up available. It happens in air travel. It has a name. It's the kind of situation that turns a normal gate into a pressure cooker, because one small decision can make someone feel chosen or discarded. No one in line announces it. You only feel it in the way staff stops smiling, in the way the computer screen becomes the final authority, in the way everyone starts clutching documents like they're life vests. The mother didn't know any of that for sure in that moment. What she knew was simpler. They had done what you're supposed to do. They were standing where you're supposed to stand. They were waiting for their turn like everyone else. And still, she could feel eyes sliding over them, measuring, deciding, not because of anything they said. Just because a crowded line makes people hunt for someone to blame when the system gets tense. They reached the front. The space opened up like a stage. The little girl stepped forward first. Small shoes planted on the floor, shoulders squared the way children do when they're trying to be brave without knowing it. She held out the boarding pass. Her hand didn't shake. The gate agent didn't look up at her face at first. The agent looked at the paper, then at the scanner, then at the monitor. Beep. The sound was quick. Normal. The kind of sound that usually means you get to keep moving. But the agent's fingers froze on the keyboard. The pause was tiny, almost polite. And that's what made it dangerous. The agent leaned in toward the screen like the screen had whispered something offensive. A second beep followed, sharper, like the machine was refusing to cooperate. The agent tapped again. Click, click. No smile. No have a great flight. Just silence stretching thin over the counter. Behind them, the line pressed closer. Someone exhaled loud on purpose. The mother felt it before she saw it. The shift from we're all just travelers to don't make me late. And in that tight, fluorescent, unforgiving space, the little girl stood perfectly still, holding a piece of paper that was supposed to mean she belonged. The gate agent's eyes stayed on the screen, not on the child. One more tap. One more scan. The machine chirped again, and then the agent's mouth tightened like the computer had just issued a verdict. No, the agent said. Flat. It's not coming up. The mother blinked. What do you mean it's not coming up? The agent held the boarding pass between two fingers. Ma'am, the system doesn't show her as cleared to board. Cleared to board. 4 words. Cold. Legal. Final. The mother leaned in, trying to keep her voice calm because she could feel the line behind her turning. She's right here. The pass is right here. We checked in. The agent's fingers moved fast. Click. 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 Then a pause. The monitor tilted away just enough to keep it private. I'm telling you what I'm seeing, the agent replied. Her status changed. Changed to what the mother asked. The agent didn't answer the question, not directly. The agent went straight to control. "Ma'am, step aside." The mother didn't move, not because she wanted a scene, because she knew what stepping aside meant. It meant disappearing. "Step aside," the agent repeated. Louder. "Now." A couple of heads snapped up. A man behind them exhaled hard, impatient. Another voice, sharp. Male cut in from the side. "Sir, she's with a child. Relax." The little girl stood perfectly still, gripping her backpack straps like they were handles on a life raft. Her eyes flicked to the strangers watching people with no stake in her life, but plenty of judgment in their faces. The mother swallowed. "Can you rescan it? Can you print it again? Can you—" The agent cut her off. "Ma'am, I don't make the rules. The system does." There it was. The phrase that turns a human being into a policy problem. "Then explain the rule," the mother said. "Because she has a boarding pass." The agent slid it back like it was being returned. "Denied? This does not authorize boarding if the system says no." A hush settled at the podium. Not the whole gate. Just that tight circle where humiliation happens in public. Someone near the seats said, "That's a kid," someone else called out. "Get a supervisor." The agent ignored them, keeping the voice professional because you can do almost anything to someone as long as you sound calm while you do it. "Ma'am," the agent said again, each syllable clipped. "If you refuse to comply, I can call airport security." Security. A few passengers actually gasped, and over their heads, the loudspeaker kept moving on with its cheerful rhythm. Now boarding, like the airport itself was determined to pretend nothing was wrong. That contrast is brutal. Your child is being erased at a counter, and the world around you is still shopping, sipping coffee, and tapping watches. The mother's hand tightened around her phone. She wasn't filming. Not yet. She was still trying to solve it the old-fashioned way, ask. Listen. Fix. But the agent had already moved to the next screen, already looking past them, already preparing to scan the next passenger, like the girl was a glitch. And here's what makes it even scarier. Airlines have a real term for when there are more passengers ready to board than there are seats. Oversales. It can lead to denied boarding. That doesn't prove what was happening here. It just explains how a name can be in one moment and out the next, without warning. "How is she not in your system?" the mother demanded. Louder now. "You just scanned it." The agent's jaw flexed. "Ma'am, your daughter is not cleared. Step away from the boarding lane." The little girl's cheeks warmed. Not with tears. With that sting children get when adults speak about them like they're invisible. A man 2 rows back shook his head. "That's not right." The mother looked down at her daughter, and you could see the calculation in her eyes because she knew the rule of public spaces. The second you get loud, you become the problem. The agent leaned forward, lowering the voice into something almost polite. "Ma'am, last warning. Step aside." And the girl, 8 years old, small hands, big eyes, stood at the edge of that counter, like a defendant who didn't even know the charge, while the gate kept boarding around her, one beep at a time. The agent didn't look confused anymore. The system glitch tone vanished, and what replaced it was that calm, practiced voice like a script snapping into place. "Ma'am," she said, tapping the counter, "you need to verify your information." "My information," the mother repeated. "You just scanned it." "And it didn't validate," the agent replied, eyes glued to the screen. That usually means something is incorrect. Usually. A word that blames you without saying blame. Incorrect, how the mother asked. "Name, birthday." "You're holding the pass." The agent sighed, like the conversation itself was the inconvenience. "Ma'am, if you checked in late, if you missed a requirement, if you're not fully confirmed. We're here. The mother cut in. We're on time. And I'm telling you, the agent said, voice tightening. She is not eligible to board at this moment. Eligible. Another word that turns a child into a category. The line behind them shifted. Luggage wheels clicked. People stared at their phones like it was safer than looking at a mother being cornered. Is the flight full? The mother asked. Steady. The agent paused just a beat, then recovered. Ma'am, I can't discuss internal operations at the podium. Please step aside so we can continue boarding. That wasn't an answer. It was a shove wrapped in policy language. I'm not stepping aside, the mother said. Not until you tell me what changed. The agent's mouth tightened. Ma'am, nothing was changed. The system reflects your status. My status, the mother echoed, heat rising. So now it's my fault. I'm not blaming anyone, the agent replied. Too quickly. I'm explaining the policy. Policy, the magic word. Say it. And disrespect sounds like procedure. The mother pointed at the scanner. Then explain why a boarding pass isn't enough. The agent leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was doing a favor. Ma'am, if you don't comply, you will delay the flight. And that becomes a security concern. Security? Like a switch, a man in the line muttered. That's not right. Someone else whispered. Call the manager. The crowd wasn't brave yet, but it was waking up. The mother kept her voice controlled, because she knew the trap. Loud equals disruptive. Quiet equals erased. Call a supervisor, she said. The agent didn't move. They're busy. Then call them anyway. The mother replied. Because you're not going to talk to my child like she's a problem. The agent finally looked at the little girl, quick, cold, evaluative. Then she raised her voice, just enough for the line to hear. Ma'am, your party is not cleared. Step out of the boarding lane. That was the escalation, not the words. The broadcast. The little girl's face went still. No tears, no tantrum. Just that stiff, quiet kids get when they realize strangers are watching them be judged. Right there, in front of strangers. She was shrinking. Mom, she whispered. I'm right here, her mother said, squeezing her hand. A man 2 people back spoke up. Louder now. You can't just bump a kid. Sir, the agent snapped. This is not your reservation. It's everybody's business when you treat a child like that. He shot back. And here's what matters. When a flight ends up with more people ready to fly than there are seats. The Department of Transportation says the airline is supposed to ask for volunteers before it forces anyone to be left behind. Choice first. Force last. But the agent at the podium wasn't talking about choices. She was talking about compliance. Ma'am, she said. Flat. Last request. Step aside. The mother lifted her chin. No. You want me out of line so you can pretend we were never here. The agent's hand hovered near the phone. If you continue refusing, I will contact airport security. A woman near the seats blurted, Don't do that, just fix it. The agent didn't even glance at her. Ma'am, you are becoming disruptive. Disruptive. The label that turns a question into a threat. The mother's cheeks burned. Not from shame, from rage held tightly behind her teeth. I'm asking for an explanation. And I'm giving you one, the agent said. You are not eligible to board. The scanner kept beeping for other passengers, one after another. Like the world could keep moving as long as the line moved, even when a child's dignity was the thing being left behind. This wasn't about a boarding pass, it was about dignity. Because the moment a grown adult looks at a child and decides she's a problem, something uglier than a travel delay is happening right in the open. And the wild part is how normal it can look. No shouting, no scene, just a counter, a scanner, a voice that hides behind policy like it's armor. In America, people love to say respect is earned. But a kid shouldn't have to earn basic respect. A mother shouldn't have to perform calmness like a job interview just to keep her child from being labeled. And yet, that's the game. Speak up, and you're disruptive. Stay quiet, and you're erased. The line keeps moving. The plane keeps boarding. And you're left standing there, trying not to crack while strangers pretend it's none of their business. That's how public humiliation works when it's done with a smile. It doesn't need insults. It needs an audience. It needs that one person in power who knows the crowd will police itself with silence. You could feel it in the air, the way people avoided eye contact, the way they suddenly became experts at staring through a situation. Everyone could sense something was wrong, but nobody wanted to become the next target. Because once the spotlight hits you in a crowded gate, you don't just feel embarrassed, you feel exposed. Like your worth is being debated by strangers with backpacks and coffee cups. And the cruelest part, the child learns a lesson without anyone ever teaching it out loud. She learns that adults can decide she doesn't belong without proving anything. She learns that a uniform can turn a normal question into a threat. She learns that rules can be used like a weapon when the person holding them doesn't see you as fully human. Let that sink in. A kid doesn't walk away remembering the flight number. She remembers the feeling, the tightness in her chest when people look at her, like she's slowing them down. The way her mom's hand squeezed harder, not because she was scared of missing a plane, but because she was trying to keep her child's spirit from collapsing in public. That's why this hits so deep, because we've all been there, in our own way. Not at a gate, maybe, but in a room where you knew you were being judged. In a line where you could feel eyes measuring you. In a moment where someone talked to you like you were less, and you realized everyone around you had decided staying comfortable mattered more than standing up. And listen, there's a difference between order and cruelty. There's a difference between keeping things moving and treating someone like they're disposable. A society can have rules and still have decency. In fact, the whole point of rules is supposed to protect people, not humiliate them. But when policy becomes a shield for disrespect, that's not professionalism. That's cowardice with a badge. And a child should never be the price we pay for someone else's ego. Because if you can publicly corner a mother and her little girl, if you can threaten them with security while everyone watches, what you're really saying is your comfort matters less than my authority. And that right there is the moment the stakes stop being a simple travel problem. It becomes a test of who we are when it's inconvenient to do the right thing. So I want you to be honest with yourself if you were standing in that line, hearing that tone, watching that child freeze up under all those eyes. Would you speak up? Or would you do what most people do and pretend not to see? Drop it in the comments. Because the answer says more about us than any boarding pass ever could. And that's when it happened, the part nobody in that line could explain later, without lowering their voice. Because the little girl didn't do what people expect an 8-year-old to do when adults corner her in public. She didn't melt down. She didn't beg. She didn't look at the floor like she was guilty of something she couldn't name. She looked up, not frantic. Not confused, just steady. Her mom's hand was still wrapped around hers, warm and tight, the way a parent holds on when they're trying to keep their own anger from becoming a scene. But the child's fingers didn't tremble. They stayed soft, almost relaxed, like she'd decided fear wasn't getting a seat at the gate today. The gate agent was mid-sentence, still wearing that practiced airline smile, the one that says, "I'm polite, therefore I'm right." The scanner sat in her palm like a tiny judge's gavel. Her voice didn't rise. It had that flat authority that makes people obey before they even realize they're obeying. "Ma'am, I told you." And right there, in the space between told and you, the child's smile appeared. Not big, not cute, not performative. A small, controlled curve at the corner of her mouth, like she'd just remembered something the rest of the room didn't know. You could feel the line react before anyone moved. A man stopped tapping his foot. A woman froze with her phone half raised, deciding whether to record or pretend she didn't see. Because the girl leaned forward slightly, just enough for her voice to carry, but not enough to look like she was challenging anyone. And she spoke. One sentence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." No yelling, no attitude, just clean English, calm, almost polite. The kind of sentence adults say when they know they have leverage. And the gate agent blinked. Not because the words were complicated, because the confidence didn't match the body saying them. It's a strange thing to watch someone in power get interrupted by a child's composure. Most people think authority is a uniform, a badge, a counter between you and them. But real authority, the kind that makes a room stop breathing, can come from a tone that refuses to be lowered. The gate agent tried to recover. You could see it in her posture, the quick flick to the monitor, the inhale that usually turns into another line of policy. She wanted the script back. "Excuse me," she snapped. And that was the first crack. Because now the mask slipped just enough for everyone to hear the annoyance underneath the professionalism. The girl didn't flinch. She didn't look to her mom for permission. She didn't backpedal. She just repeated it softer this time, like she was offering a warning instead of a threat. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." And something in the crowd shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. People stopped pretending they were invisible. They started looking at the agent the way you look at someone who's about to do something they'll regret. Like, just don't. The mother's face changed too, because in that moment, she realized her child wasn't breaking. Her child was bracing, standing inside herself, holding the line without raising her hands. And if you've ever been in a moment like that, where the world is daring you to shrink, you know what that kind of calm costs. It costs practice. It costs lessons learned too young. It costs a parent teaching you, quietly, that your dignity is not something people get to borrow. The gate agent tried the old trick, next the one that usually works on tired travelers. She leaned in, lowered her voice, and tried to make it personal. "Sweetie, you need to let your mom handle this." Sweetie, that word, that tone, the kind that sounds caring, but lands like a leash. And the girl's smile didn't disappear. If anything, it sharpened. Because she didn't answer the agent's instruction. She answered the assumption, and she didn't give a speech. She didn't explain. She just held that same sentence in the air like a mirror, forcing the adult across the counter to look at herself. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." And for a beat, just one beat, the gate agent was the one who looked unsure. The scanner was still in her hand. The line was still behind them. The announcement still echoed overhead. But the space belonged to that child's calm now, and everyone felt it. The mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She turned to the counter and said, "I need a supervisor. Now." The gate agent's smile stayed on, but it thinned. "Ma'am, there's nothing a supervisor can do," she said, eyes flicking to the line. "The system shows what it shows." The little girl stayed close at her mom's side, quiet and steady. And that steadiness made the moment louder. "Call a supervisor," the mom repeated. "Not a plea, a decision?" The agent exhaled, just enough to be heard. The universal signal for "you're the problem." "Ma'am, boarding is in progress. We have priorities. We have policy. We have a contract of carriage." She said it like it was a shield. I don't make the rules. And for a second, every passenger did the same silent math. If she's saying policy, then someone decided this was allowed. The mother didn't argue feelings. She spoke like someone who's learned the only language institutions respect. "Then bring me the person who can explain the decision," she said. Because my child is not stepping aside like she did something wrong. The gate agent's jaw tightened. Her fingers clicked across the keyboard, fast, impatient. "Ma'am, the system shows she's not eligible to board," she said. Sharper now. "That's all I can tell you. Not eligible." 2 words that sound administrative and feel like exile. Not eligible based on what the mother asked. Based on the system, the agent snapped. Like the computer was a judge and she was just reading the verdict. Then she turned her head and called out, "Supervisor to the gate." The scanner kept beeping for other passengers. Boarding moved around them like a river trying not to notice the rock in the middle. And that's how public humiliation works. It doesn't need yelling. It just needs time. A woman with a rolling carry-on whispered, "Sir, that's a child." Another man lifted his phone, then lowered it, unsure if recording was help or trouble. Nobody wanted to be the headline, but nobody wanted to be the person who watched and did nothing either. The mother kept her posture calm, but her hand found her daughter's shoulder. A small, protective touch. A reminder to everyone in that line, this isn't a seat number. This is a kid. Finally, a man in a blazer arrived with that practiced airport authority, half customer service, half compliance. He didn't rush to apologize. He didn't rush to look the child in the eye. He walked up like he was handling a disruption. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. Voice low, controlled. "Let's de-escalate," he added, as if the problem was emotion, not procedure. The mother didn't take the bait. "De-escalate," she said. "Steady. My daughter has a boarding pass. Your agent says she isn't eligible. I want an explanation." The manager nodded once, nodded her at the screen. "Okay," he said. "Let me look. And you don't want to miss the next 10 seconds, because there's a moment right before authority speaks, when their eyes hit the information and their face chooses a story." He leaned in. The gate agent started talking fast, already stacking words like sandbags. "System changed her status," she said. "We have boarding priority. Contract says, the manager murmured. Scrolling. The mother stayed silent and let him see it. That's another hard truth. When someone is about to hide behind policy, make them say it out loud in front of witnesses. The manager straightened, just enough to reset his tone. "Ma'am," he said. "Sometimes when a flight is full, the system follows boarding priority rules. Boarding priority rules. Not vibes, not opinions. Rules. And those rules can consider things like when you checked in, your seat assignment, your fare, and frequent flyer status. They can also account for situations like disability or a child traveling as an unaccompanied minor. Not because it feels kind in the moment, but because that's how airlines decide who gets protected when there aren't enough seats. The crowd absorbed that like a cold draft, because it meant this wasn't just a glitch, it was a process. The manager kept his voice professional, almost gentle. "Let me verify what the system is showing," he said, "and let me see what options are available." Options. That word landed like a door half open. Not a promise, not an apology. Just the first sign that the problem had finally reached someone who couldn't pretend it wasn't real. The manager's eyes stayed on the screen, but the mother's voice stayed on the truth. "Sir," she said, calm enough to scare people. If this is an oversold situation, if you're denying boarding, then there are things you're required to do. Not later. Not after I beg. Now. The gate agent reached for the safest script in the building. We're still looking into it. Ma'am. And that's when a voice came from the line. Not angry. Not loud. Just sharp. Actually, she's right. A man said, stepping half a foot forward like he'd decided he wasn't going to be part of the silence. If you're involuntarily denying boarding, the airline has to give a written explanation. The rules, the limits, everything. The manager's face didn't change, but his eyes flicked up for the first time. Because authority hates one thing more than conflict. A witness who knows the language. The mother nodded once. I'm not asking for special treatment, she said. I'm asking for what's required. And here's what makes moments like this so infuriating. Most people don't lose in airports because they're wrong. They lose because they don't know what to say. They don't know which words force the system to stop pretending. Written, the man repeated. Softer now, like a reminder. You have to tell them the conditions and the limits. And you have to tell them your boarding priority rules. Paper trail, documentation. The two things that turn a policy voice into accountability. The gate agent tried to brush it away. Sir, we handle this internally, she said. The man didn't blink. Internally isn't the same as properly, he replied. Now the crowd shifted. Not dramatic, just awake. You could feel it, people listening harder, watching closer. Because nobody wants to be next. The manager raised a hand. The universal signal for let me take control. Okay, he said. Let's keep this calm. But calm isn't the same as correct. The mother leaned in just a little. Not aggressive focused. Also, she added, if we're being denied boarding, you're supposed to proactively offer compensation, voluntary or involuntary. I shouldn't have to ask you, but I do. Because think about it. How many times have you watched someone get told, there's nothing we can do, when the truth was, there's something we won't do unless you make us? Have you ever been standing in a public place and felt your stomach drop because the rules were being used like a weapon? Drop it in the comments. Would you have spoken up or stayed quiet? The gate agent's shoulders went stiff. She glanced at the manager, like, are we really doing this? And the manager, he didn't deny it. He didn't say, that's not true. He didn't say, you're mistaken. He just said, let me confirm what applies in this case. That's the corporate version of, I know you're right, but I need to make it sound like I discovered it myself. He turned to the gate agent. Do we have the documentation ready? The agent blinked. That's not something we usually. Do we have it? The manager repeated, slower now. Because the moment you force someone to answer a yes or no question, the fog disappears. The agent's fingers tapped the keyboard again. This time, not impatient, nervous. She printed something, paper sliding out with that dry mechanical scrape that always sounds louder when you're already embarrassed. The mother didn't reach for it yet. She waited, because in that waiting was a lesson every parent wants their child to learn. Don't snatch at scraps when you're owed respect. The manager cleared his throat. Ma'am, if this becomes an involuntary denied boarding situation, we will provide a written statement explaining the conditions and the limits, and our boarding priority rules. There it was, out loud, in public, and the offer the mother asked. The manager's jaw tightened, a tiny crack in the polished mask. We will make the appropriate offer, he said. We will not wait for you to request it. The mother took the paper and folded it carefully, like it mattered. Because it did. Not just for her, For every person in that gate area who had ever been told to step aside and accept it. And the little girl, she looked up at her mom, then at the counter, then at the people watching, still calm, still steady, like she was learning, in real time, that rights don't protect you unless you know how to hold them in your hands. The gate agent didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She used something sharper, a smile that wasn't warm, a tone that said, "I'm being professional," while every word said, "You're a problem." "Ma'am," she sighed, loud enough for the line to hear. "We've explained this. Please step aside so we can continue boarding. Not so we can solve it. Not so we can help you. So we can move you out of the way." The mother held the paper in her hand, folded neat, like evidence, and kept her voice steady. "I'm not refusing to step aside," she said. "I'm asking you to follow the process you just acknowledged. Written explanation, priority rules, and the offer you said you don't wait for us to request." The agent's eyes flicked to the child, then back to the mother. "She's getting disruptive," the agent said to the manager, as if naming it made it true. Disruptive. That word gets thrown like handcuffs in airports. The mother didn't shout. She didn't curse. She didn't touch a soul. But suddenly she was disruptive because she refused to shrink. The agent turned her body slightly, just enough to block the counter. Quiet. Automatic. Final. "Ma'am," she repeated. Slower now. "If you continue, we can call security. And listen, if you've never had that sentence aimed at you, you might not understand the weight of it, because in an airport, security isn't a suggestion, it's a threat wrapped in policy." The mother swallowed. "Once. Not fear. Control. Please don't threaten me for asking questions," she said. The agent cut her off. "No one is threatening you. I'm informing you of procedure." Procedure? That's the magic word. The word that lets people act cold and still feel righteous. The little girl stayed close to her mom's hip, backpack straps clenched in tiny fists. Her face didn't beg. It watched. "Sweetie," the agent said, suddenly soft, suddenly performative. "Why don't you come stand over here with me while your mom figures this out?" It wasn't kindness. It was separation, a way to turn a child into leverage. The mother's answer came fast. "She stays with me." The agent's smile tightened. "Okay. Then we need you both to step aside." Now the line could hear everything, and the line did what lines always do. They stared. Then they pretended not to. That's how public humiliation works. Not with screaming. With spectators. But then the mother lifted the paper slightly. "Just to be clear," she said. Not yelling, projecting. "You are refusing to resolve this at the counter, while holding a written statement that explains what you must provide, and you're threatening security because I'm asking for it." Silence. The manager's mouth opened, then closed. Because it wasn't about what he wanted to say. It was about what he could say with everyone listening. And that's when the crowd changed. A woman 2 spots back, coffee in hand, finally spoke. "Hey," she said. Blunt. American. Done with the performance. She's not being disruptive. You're the one escalating. A man in a ball cap nodded like he'd been waiting for permission. "Yeah. She's literally just asking questions." Another voice. Older. Tired. "Why are you talking to her like that? There's a kid right there." The agent's cheeks flushed. Not guilt. Offense. "Sir," she snapped, then caught herself. "Ma'am, please. This is a secure area. We have policies." Policies. Again. It's amazing how quickly policy becomes a shield when someone's tone gets exposed. The woman with the coffee stepped closer. Not into the counter, just closer. Then follow your policy, she said. Stop threatening her. Now the agent's professionalism cracked. You don't know the situation, she said. Please stay out of it. And the woman didn't blink. I know what I'm hearing, she replied. And I know what I'm seeing. That's the moment power slips. Not when a form gets printed. When strangers stop letting you rewrite reality. Because the bias doesn't always wear a hood. Sometimes it wears a lanyard. It uses ma'am like a slap. It calls you difficult when you ask to be treated like a customer, and it hopes you'll back down before anyone notices. Have you ever watched something wrong happen in public and told yourself, it's not my business? Be honest, have you ever regretted staying quiet? Because that gate wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a mirror. And the line of strangers was finally choosing which side they wanted to see themselves on. The manager's radio finally cracked, and you could feel the shift before you heard it, because the gate agent stopped performing for the crowd and started performing for someone above her. Ups. I need an assist at the podium, she said. Passenger is refusing to step aside. Refusing. That word again. The mother didn't fight the label. She asked one question, calm and loud enough for the line to hear. Who's in charge here? A beat. Then the higher authority arrived, badge heavier, posture straighter, walking up like the courtroom just opened. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He looked at the crowd first, like he was taking attendance, then at the mother, then at the little girl. And then he looked at the screen. That's the moment you don't want to miss when someone who isn't trapped in the gate agent's ego finally sees the situation in plain text. What's going on? He asked. The gate agent snapped into her script. Her boarding pass isn't valid. The system doesn't show her as cleared. She's delaying boarding. The higher authority didn't nod. He didn't comfort her. He turned to the manager instead. Is this oversold? He asked. The word oversold hit the air like a gavel. And suddenly, everybody remembered where they were, an American gate, where policy can sound like law, even when it's just someone trying to end a conversation. The manager hesitated, eyes darting, fingers hovering over the keyboard like the truth might bite. So the higher authority followed with the question that made people in the line lift their heads. Did you ask for volunteers? He said. Voice flat. Did you ask if anyone would take a later flight before you stopped boarding someone involuntarily? The gate agent opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And that silence did something to the crowd. It made them realize this wasn't a technical glitch anymore. It was a choice. Have you ever watched someone get labeled difficult when all they did was ask for fairness? Be honest. Did you speak up? Or did you stare at your phone and pray it wouldn't be you next? Because in an oversold situation, you ask for volunteers first. That's the principle. Before anyone gets bumped against their will, before a child gets turned into an issue in front of a line of strangers. The mother didn't cheer. She didn't beg. She held her paper steady. I'm not asking for special treatment, she said. I'm asking for the process. The little girl stood close to her mother's hip, eyes steady, shoulders small, but not folded, not shrinking, not pleading. The higher authority nodded once, then turned back to the gate agent, still calm, but colder. If we don't have enough volunteers, he said, then we follow the boarding priority rules. The rules this carrier is required to have. We do not improvise. He pointed at the monitor. Show me the priority list. The manager's hands moved fast. Too fast. Like he knew exactly what this screen was about to confess. The gate agent tried to save herself. Sir, I'm just following what the system. The higher authority cut her off with one sentence. The system follows us. You could hear a collective inhale, Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. A man near the back muttered, "That's right." Someone else whispered, "Finally." And you could feel the line this random jury of strangers start to tilt. The higher authority leaned in again. Is she being denied boarding involuntarily? Another gavel, another chance to hide behind vague words. The manager cleared his throat. "We may have a seat issue. Then we handle it correctly," the higher authority said. "Volunteers first. If we still don't have enough, we apply the boarding priority rules as written, and we document it." He turned slightly toward the crowd, just enough to signal, "I know you're watching." Good. Then he looked back at the gate agent. "And we do not threaten security to cover a procedural failure," he said. "Do you understand?" Her jaw tightened. Then she swallowed. "Yes, sir." The mother exhaled once, slow, controlled, not relief. Recognition. Because most people don't lose these moments because they're wrong. They lose because the person behind the counter speaks in policy voice, and everyone else shrinks. But today, the smallest person in the scene wasn't the one shrinking. And when the higher authority's gaze flicked to the little girl, steady, quiet, unafraid, you could feel the gate finally understand. This wasn't just about a boarding pass. This was about what happens when someone tries to quietly take your place, and you refuse to move. The higher authority didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He pointed at the podium like it was a line on the floor. "Step back," he told the gate agent. "Let the supervisor run this. Not fired, not dragged away, just removed from the moment right in front of a line full of strangers." And for the first time all morning, the gate agent looked small. A supervisor slid in beside the keyboard, headset on, face tight with that corporate calm. "All right," she said, palms open. "Let's de-escalate." "Ma'am, I'm going to take care of you." The mother didn't soften. She didn't smile to make it easier for them. "Then do it correctly," she said, "and put it in writing." That's the phrase that changes everything in America, because talk disappears. Paper doesn't. The supervisor nodded once, like she understood why that sentence mattered. She looked at the screen, then at the higher authority, then back at the mother. "If this is an involuntary denied boarding situation," she said carefully, "we'll provide the required written statement." Required? Not as a courtesy. Not if you ask nicely. Required. And when she said that out loud, the crowd reacted like someone finally said the quiet part into a microphone. The supervisor kept her eyes on the monitor, fingers moving. Click, scroll, another click, like she was trying to untangle a knot without admitting someone tied it. Then she looked up. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. Voice even. "We're going to document what happened at this gate. We're going to give you the written explanation that comes with an involuntary denied boarding decision conditions, limits, and the carrier's boarding priority rules." She said it like a checklist, but the mother heard what it really was: accountability. And then the supervisor did something the gate agent never did. She stopped talking at them and started talking to them. "I also want to be clear," she added, still professional, still guarded. "There are specific situations where compensation may not apply. If a passenger hasn't met check-in requirements, if a flight is canceled, or if the aircraft is changed to a smaller one for operational or safety reasons. Those are examples where denied boarding compensation might not be due." She didn't say it to threaten. She said it to frame the rules, to make sure the record was clean. And the mother nodded, not intimidated, not impressed. "Great," she said. Then you'll have no problem stating exactly which one you're claiming applies here. In writing, that's when you saw the supervisor's posture tighten, because the moment you ask for specifics, the policy voice loses its camouflage. The higher authority didn't blink. "Start the paperwork now," he said. "At the gate, not later." Domino 1. The gate agent was no longer in control. Domino 2. The supervisor was now speaking in obligations, not attitudes. Domino 3. The situation was being treated like a compliance issue, not a customer who needed to be managed. The supervisor turned the screen slightly toward herself and began typing as the printer behind the podium whirred to life. Thin sheets. Official looking. The kind of paper that makes people behave. "Ma'am," she said, reaching for the printout. "This written statement explains the process, the boarding priority rules, and the conditions that affect compensation. I'm also going to provide documentation of what we're offering you right now." She slid the paper across the counter like it was a contract. "We can rebook you," she said, "and we can discuss compensation consistent with the rules, depending on how this is classified. But we're not going to leave you standing here without documentation." Behind the mother, the crowd started shifting, not impatient now, but attentive, like they were watching a lesson they didn't know they needed. Have you ever noticed how fast people become brave when someone else proves the system can't bully you in silence? The little girl looked up at her mother, then at the paper, then back at the adults, who suddenly found their manners. And the supervisor, still not warm, still not friendly, finally said the closest thing to an apology she could afford in public. "I'm sorry for how this was handled at the podium," she said. "That shouldn't have happened. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't tears. It was a sentence. But at that gate, in that moment, it landed like a door closing. Because now it was official. Now it was documented. Now it wasn't just a mother's word against a gate agent's tone. It was the airline's own process on paper being forced to show its face." Up in the cabin, the noise of the gate felt miles away. The mother slid into her seat like she'd been carrying a weight in her chest, and finally found somewhere solid to set it down. Her daughter buckled in, legs swinging, eyes still too calm for what just happened. And here's the part that hits different when the doors close. Because once you're on the plane, everyone around you quietly expects the story to end. They expect you to swallow it, to take the win of getting aboard and move on, to treat humiliation like a toll you pay to travel. But the mother stared at the paper in her hands and knew something the gate agent never understood. This wasn't over just because the line stopped watching. Accountability isn't a feeling, it's a process. And in America, if you want the truth to survive past the moment, you build a trail that can't be erased. You keep what was handed to you. You write down what was said. You hold on to names, times, and everything you can prove without begging anyone to believe you. Because "I'm sorry" disappears. Documentation doesn't. She looked at her daughter, then out the window at the crew moving equipment below, and you could see the decision fighting in her face. One side of her wanted peace. The other side wanted principle. Have you ever been in that exact spot where you can either let it go or you can make it matter? And listen, making it matter doesn't mean yelling. It doesn't mean going viral. It doesn't mean turning into the person they tried to paint you as. It means doing it the boring way, the official way, the way that forces people to answer. Because the Department of Transportation doesn't just exist for headlines. It exists for complaints, especially when an airline doesn't resolve something in a way that's satisfactory. And yes, that includes complaints about being treated unfairly in ways that cross a legal line. Race, color, national origin, sex, religion, ancestry. Those words aren't drama, they're categories. They're the difference between I felt disrespected and you need to explain your conduct. So the mother didn't rant. She didn't post from the seatback screen. She did what grown-ups do when they refuse to be broken by a system that counts on your exhaustion. She prepared to file a complaint. And when you file it with the DOT, here's what matters. You're not screaming into a void. The DOT forwards the complaint to the airline. The airline is required to respond. And then the DOT reviews what comes back. That's not instant revenge. That's slow accountability. That's the kind that keeps companies up at night because it creates records, patterns, and consequences. And maybe you're thinking, but what if nothing happens? Let me tell you something, even when change is slow, a paper trail changes how power treats you next time, because people who can't be erased are dangerous to the people who abuse procedure. So she pulled out a pen, not for theatrics, for precision. She wrote down what she remembered while it was still fresh, because memory fades. But notes don't. She tucked the paperwork into her bag like it was evidence, not a souvenir. And she told her daughter, quietly, like a lesson you pass down. We don't argue with chaos. We answer it with a record. That's tradition. That's discipline. That's dignity with structure. And I want to ask you something, right here, because this isn't just their story. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong in a place you had every right to be? Have you ever watched someone else get pushed around and felt that split-second fear that speaking up would make you the target? Be honest in the comments. I read them. People learn from them. And if you've ever filed an official complaint anywhere, not just travel, tell us what happened. Did you get a response? Did it change anything? Or did you learn what you'd do differently next time? Because the real takeaway isn't know your rights. The real takeaway is use the channels that force an answer. Keep the receipts, keep the names, keep the timeline. Hold them accountable the way the system recognizes. That's how ordinary people stop being easy to dismiss. And that's how a little girl grows up watching her mother turn a moment of disrespect into a lesson no one can erase. And that's when the mother finally understood why her daughter never begged, because the sentence wasn't a threat, it was a boundary. Back at the gate under fluorescent lights, in front of strangers, and a scanner that suddenly couldn't find her, the little girl looked up and smiled like she knew something the adults had forgotten. I wouldn't do that if I were you. People heard attitude. People heard bravado. But what she really said was, I know who I am, and I know what you're doing. That line didn't come from ego. It came from training, not military training, not some fantasy of power, the kind of training you learn at kitchen tables, in living rooms where adults don't just say, be polite. They teach you how to carry yourself when someone tries to shrink you. Because in this country, you don't get to choose whether you'll face someone with a policy voice. You only get to choose what you do when it happens. Some people fold. Some people explode. And some people do something rarer. They stay calm. Not because they're weak, because they're ready. That child's smile wasn't a performance. It was control. It was the quiet confidence of someone who's been told, over and over, your dignity is not negotiable. And that's why the moment hit the gate agent like cold water, because power expects noise from the powerless. Tears, pleading, a raised voice they can label disruptive, but a calm child is a mirror, and mirrors are terrifying to people who are trying to hide. Have you ever watched an adult talk down to a kid like they were a problem to be managed? Not a person, a problem, a delay, a button to click. That's why this story grips you. Because it wasn't just a boarding pass, it was a test. A test of whether a system can intimidate you into stepping aside and staying quiet. And the smallest person in the scene refused to step aside on the inside. She didn't cry. She didn't bargain. She held eye contact and delivered one sentence like a door closing. I wouldn't do that if I were you. And now, knowing what you know, you can hear the second sentence she didn't say out loud. You can hear it in her posture, in the way she didn't flinch when adults argued over her like she was luggage. It was this: my mother taught me the rules, and my mother taught me myself. That's the part that changes everything. Because when people talk about rights, they often talk like it's paperwork. Cold, technical, boring. But rights are just another word for the space a human being is allowed to take up without apology. Dignity is that space. Accountability is what protects it. And when you raise a child to understand that when you raise them to speak with respect, but refuse humiliation, you're not creating arrogance. You're creating armor. Good armor doesn't make you loud. It makes you steady. So later, when the crowd scattered and the gate went back to its normal rhythm, the mother didn't celebrate like she'd won a prize. She looked at her daughter with a kind of pride that wasn't flashy. The old-fashioned kind. The kind that says, I'm doing my job. Because the world will try to teach your child that they are less than in 100 subtle ways. And a good parent teaches the opposite, just as quietly. They teach them to speak clearly, to stand straight, to ask questions, to keep their hands to themselves, but their self-respect intact. They teach them that kindness is not the same thing as compliance, and that a smile can be a shield. That one sentence becomes a loop in your head because it's bigger than an airport. It's for any room where someone with a little authority forgets they're still supposed to be human. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Not because she's powerful, because she understands dignity, because she knows she's allowed to take up space. And maybe that's why the whole scene felt like it shifted when she said it. Because for one moment, the gate wasn't a gate. It was a lesson delivered by the smallest voice in the crowd. And if you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong, if you've ever swallowed your words and hated yourself later, remember her smile. Remember that sentence. Then ask yourself what would change in your life if you started carrying your dignity like it was non-negotiable. Because when the smallest voice refuses to be erased, the whole room has to listen. Because in the end, this story was never about a barcode on a screen. It was about what happens when someone hides behind policy to take away a person's place in line. And it was about what happens when that person refuses to shrink. If you take anything from this, take this when a flight is oversold. The rules aren't a mystery. Airlines are supposed to ask for volunteers before they ever deny boarding involuntarily. And if something goes wrong, if you're brushed off, talked over, or treated like you don't deserve answers, you don't have to leave it in that gate. There is a formal path to hold them accountable, including filing a complaint with the UPS, Department of Transportation. But here's the deeper point. Rights don't protect you if you're too intimidated to use them. Paperwork doesn't matter if you walk away ashamed and silent. The system counts on that silence. It counts on you wanting to just get home more than you want respect. That's why that little smile mattered. Not because it was cute, because it was disciplined. Because it said you don't get to erase me and call it professionalism. So I'm asking you straight up, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up in that line? Would you have documented everything and followed the process? Or would you have looked away and told yourself it wasn't your problem? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've ever been judged unfairly in public, share your story too. Someone reading it needs the courage you didn't have back then. That's how change starts quietly. Together. Today, if this hit you, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want stories where dignity wins. And share this with one person who travels and still thinks policy means you have no choices. Because the moment we all know the rules, it gets a lot harder for anyone to abuse them.